I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped outside. The sun was barely up, the air still crisp with the morning chill, but there it was, a bright green slip tucked under my windshield wiper like a neon slap in the face. I frowned, coffee in one hand, badge clipped to my belt, and pulled the paper free. $79 fine. Violation, improper lawn maintenance. I blinked. My lawn? I turned, surveying the yard I had maintained for 15 years without a single complaint. It was neat, freshly mowed, and looked exactly the same as it always had. Sure, it wasn't a pristine golf course, but this wasn't a country club, it was a suburban neighborhood. And then I heard them. The unmistakable click of high heels on pavement. Good morning. The voice was syrupy sweet but laced with something sharp, a tone I had learned to recognize over decades in law enforcement. I turned to see Karen Mitchell, our newly elected HOA enforcer, clutching a sleek tablet and wearing a self-satisfied smirk. Miss Mitchell, I greeted, holding up the fine. Mind explaining this? My lawn meets every reasonable standard. She barely glanced up from her screen. Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the HOA guidelines clearly states that grass height must not exceed 3 inches. Yours is approximately 3.5. She tapped at the screen, probably logging another violation somewhere else. I exhaled slowly, reminding myself that arresting a neighborhood busybody wasn't a great look for a police chief. I've been a little busy lately, I said, gesturing to my uniform. Long shifts. I'll mow it this weekend. Rules are rules, she chirped, finally making eye contact. The fine doubles if not paid within 72 hours. Then, as if deliberately trying to piss me off, she gave my front yard a critical once-over. Oh, and you might want to do something about those garden gnomes. They're not on the approved decoration list. I stiffened. The gnomes weren't just decorations, they were my late wife's collection. She had spent years picking them out, each one carrying a memory. I wasn't aware I needed official approval for personal belongings that have been here for over a decade, I said, voice even. Karen's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. New board, new rules, she said, waving her tablet like a judge with a gavel. We're bringing this neighborhood into the modern age. No more tacky decorations lowering property values. She clicked away down the sidewalk, stopping in front of Emily Carter's house next door. Emily, an ER nurse, had just gotten home from an overnight shift. She barely had time to close her eyes before Karen started snapping pictures of her garbage bins. I clenched my jaw. This wasn't just about my lawn or my gnomes anymore. I had spent 25 years in law enforcement, I knew abuse of power when I saw it. And Karen had just made a mistake. Because the one thing she never considered was who she was messing with. By the time I pulled into my driveway 2 nights later, I was running on fumes. A double shift covering a bank robbery downtown had drained me, and all I wanted was to park my car, drag myself inside, and collapse into bed. But that wasn't going to happen. 2 black SUVs with HOA security logos were parked across my driveway, completely blocking access. Their engines were off, but the headlights were still glowing like eyes in the dark, and 2 men in matching, ill-fitting uniforms leaned against the hoods, arms crossed. I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face. I already knew who was behind this. Sure enough, the click of high heels on pavement announced her presence before she even spoke. Karen Mitchell, in a tailored blazer and stilettos, strutted across my lawn like she was leading a corporate takeover. Her tablet was clutched in one hand, her phone in the other, and her smug expression was firmly in place. Well, if it isn't our most persistent rule breaker, she said, tapping away at her screen. Chief Anderson, you've been racking up quite the list of violations. I exhaled slowly, forcing my exhaustion aside. Karen, you're blocking my driveway. I need to get into my garage. She didn't even acknowledge the request. Let's see, unpaid fine for lawn height violations, unauthorized garden gnome placement. And now, she paused dramatically, looking up with an expression of fake sympathy. Non-regulation mailbox color. I stared at her. My mailbox is white. It's been white for 15 years. Karen gave me a pitying smile, as if I were a misbehaving child. Classic white. Actually, HOA guidelines now require pristine pearl white from the Anderson Paint Company collection. Your mailbox is a shade too dull. I couldn't help it, I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. You're joking. She didn't blink. Rules are rules. I'm sure you understand the importance of following regulations, Chief. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of the SUVs blocking my driveway. Karen, these vehicles are illegally parked. Blocking residential access violates City Ordinance 20-345. If you don't move them, I'll have them towed. For the first time, her smile flickered. I have full authority as an HOA board member to enforce community standards, she snapped. These officers, she gestured to the two men leaning against the SUVs, are here to ensure compliance. That's when I noticed their badges. They were too shiny. Too new, ***, they looked almost like real police badges, but not quite. The uniforms were cheaply stitched, and their shoulder patches looked like they had been printed at a local copy shop. I knew every licensed security company in our jurisdiction. Mitchell Security Solutions wasn't one of them. I took a slow breath, keeping my voice measured. Karen, where did you find this security company? She folded her arms. That's none of your concern. I nodded, pulled up the city's business license database on my phone, and started typing. 3 taps later, I had exactly what I expected. There was no record of Mitchell Security Solutions. It wasn't a licensed security company. I turned my screen toward her. You sure about that? Karen's grip on her tablet tightened. I don't have time for your games, Chief. The board approved this security initiative. We're committed to keeping this neighborhood safe. I didn't take my eyes off her. Safe from what? Before she could answer, a frantic voice cut through the night. Chief Anderson. Thank God you're here. I turned to see Emily Carter, still in her hospital scrubs, running toward us. They've been blocking my driveway too, she said, breathless. I just got home from a double shift, and they threatened to tow my car if I didn't move it within 5 minutes. I slowly turned back to Karen. You're towing an ER nurse's car? After she worked a 16-hour shift saving lives? Karen didn't even flinch. She should have read the updated parking guidelines. Vehicles must be removed within 30 minutes of arrival to prevent unnecessary street congestion. Emily let out a disbelieving laugh. It's my own damn driveway. I felt my patience snap. I turned to one of the so-called security officers. You. Name and licensing number. The man shifted uncomfortably. I don't have to give you that. Yes, you do. I took a step closer, my voice calm but firm. Because right now, you're impersonating a law enforcement officer, which is a criminal offense. His Adam's apple bobbed. He glanced at Karen, waiting for her to save him. But Karen was too busy furiously typing on her tablet, pretending this wasn't happening. I turned to Emily. Take a picture of their license plates. Karen's head snapped up. That is not allowed. Actually, I said, flashing her my badge for the first time that night, it is. That's when I saw it, the briefest flicker of fear in Karen's eyes. For all her power trips and manufactured authority, she had finally realized one thing. She wasn't in control anymore. The moment Karen stormed off, clutching her tablet like a lifeline, I knew this was bigger than a few petty HOA fines. She wasn't just enforcing rules, she was protecting something. And my gut told me it had nothing to do with property values. I spent the next morning in my office at the station, poring over public records, business filings, and HOA financial reports. If Karen was running a scam, there would be a trail. There always was. I started with Mitchell Security Solutions, the so-called neighborhood security company blocking my driveway the night before. No business license. No state registration. No insurance. Nothing except a P.O. box listed as its official address. But when I dug deeper, I found a personal connection Karen hadn't disclosed. The LLC was registered under her brother, Greg Mitchell. That wasn't just shady. That was a direct violation of HOA conflict of interest policies. I ran a separate search on HOA expenses over the last 3 months. Something immediately stood out. The HOA had paid Greg's security company over $80,000 in neighborhood enforcement fees. 80 grand. In a neighborhood where crime was nearly non-existent. That's when I knew I wasn't dealing with a power-hungry HOA president. This was organized fraud. I took a sip of my coffee and kept digging, cross-referencing HOA fines and property sales. A disturbing pattern emerged. Homeowners hit with excessive fines they couldn't afford. After months of harassment, they sold their homes below market value. Many of those properties were bought by shell companies, several of which had ties to Karen's associates. She wasn't just milking residents for HOA fees. She was forcing them out and flipping their homes for profit. And she was getting away with it. A knock on my office door pulled me out of my thoughts. Lisa Brooks, our city records clerk, stepped inside, holding a thick folder. "You're not gonna like this," she said, dropping it onto my desk. I flipped through the first few pages, a contract approval from the HOA. It authorized a land purchase agreement for the neighborhood park. I felt my pulse quicken. What the hell is this? Lisa exhaled. Karen's been quietly pushing for the HOA to buy the park for community improvements. But the real kicker? She flipped to another page. Once the land is under HOA control, she plans to tear it down and build a private HOA office. I clenched my jaw. That park had been there for decades. It was where veterans held their Memorial Day ceremonies, where neighborhood kids played after school. And she wanted to turn it into a damn luxury meeting space for herself? I pushed back from my desk. This wasn't just Karen abusing her power. This was a full-scale operation to drain homeowners dry while turning the neighborhood into her personal empire. Before I could say another word, my phone buzzed. A text from Mike Harrison, the firefighter Karen had been harassing. "Chief, you need to see this. Just sent you pictures." I opened the attachments, and my blood boiled. Photos of Mitchell security vehicles parked in fire lanes. Blocking hydrants. Obstructing emergency routes. One image stood out, a security vehicle parked right in front of a fire station's emergency exit. I called him immediately. "Mike, when was this taken?" "Yesterday." His voice was tight with anger. "We got a call for a medical emergency, and the damn car was sitting right there. Cost us at least 2 extra minutes." Karen's fake security team wasn't just a scam, they were actively endangering lives. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay level-headed. "Mike, I need every violation like this documented. If you have more, send them to me." "You got it," he said. "Also, Emily just texted me. Karen's HOA just hit her with a $300 fine for parking too long in her own driveway." I hung up, my grip tightening around my phone. Karen wasn't backing down. She was doubling down. And that meant I needed to shut this down fast. I spent the rest of the afternoon building my case. Public records, property sales, fraudulent fines, fake security enforcement. Every single violation, manipulation, and abuse of power. By the time the sun had set, my desk was covered in evidence. Karen thought she was untouchable. She thought she could bully, intimidate, and fine her way into total control. But she was about to find out exactly what happens when you push the wrong person too far. The HOA emergency meeting was set for 7:00 p.m. sharp, and I made sure to arrive early. Karen had called for a community vote on her proposed security expansion, more guards, more cameras, and higher enforcement fees for repeat offenders. In reality, it was a last-ditch effort to tighten her grip on the neighborhood. I walked into the community center carrying a thick binder of evidence. The room was packed, more residents than I had ever seen at one of these meetings. People were whispering, muttering, glaring at Karen as she sat at the front table, pretending to be unbothered. She was dressed for a victory speech, not a meeting. Pearls, a navy blue power suit, nails painted the same blood-red color as her HOA violation notices. Sitting beside her was her brother, Greg Mitchell, looking just as smug. I spotted a few of her hand-picked supporters, board members who benefited from her scams, but most people? They were just tired. Tired of fines, tired of harassment, tired of her, ***. Karen tapped her microphone, flashing her practiced, politician-style smile. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her tone dripping with false warmth. "I know some of you have concerns about the recent security measures, but I assure you, everything we've done is for the good of this community." A few half-hearted claps. Not many. She continued, flipping through her prepared notes. "We have to maintain our standards. Property values have gone up since these rules were enforced, and thanks to our new security patrols, crime is down 15%. That was my cue. I stood up. Loudly. ***, that's a lie, ***. The room went silent. Karen's eyes snapped to mine. "Pardon me, Chief Anderson," she said, her voice still controlled, but there was an edge of unease. "This is a residents' discussion, not a law enforcement hearing." I ignored her. "Before we vote on handing over more money to your fake security force, I think everyone here deserves to know exactly where their HOA fees have been going." I walked to the front and set my binder on the table, flipping it open for everyone to see. "First, let's talk about Mitchell Security Solutions," I said, turning to the crowd. "Many of you have had your cars blocked, your driveways obstructed, even been threatened by these so-called security officers. What you don't know is that this company is not licensed, not insured, and not legally registered with the state." A wave of murmurs rolled through the crowd. Karen forced a laugh. "This is absurd. Chief, you're overstepping." I clicked my remote, projecting a document onto the screen, the company's state registration records, completely blank. "Not only that," I continued, "but the owner of this company is your brother, Greg Mitchell. You never disclosed this, which is a clear violation of HOA bylaws." Now the murmurs turned to outright outrage. "She's been paying her own family with our dues," someone shouted. "You mean the guys harassing nurses and firefighters don't even have real credentials?" another voice echoed. Karen's smile was officially gone. I flipped the page. "And it gets worse. Let's talk about where your fines are actually going. In the last 3 months, over $80,000 has been paid out to Mitchell Security Solutions for neighborhood enforcement." Gasps. One of the board members, Mr. Reynolds, who had always seemed neutral, frowned. "Karen, is this true?" Karen grabbed the microphone, her face turning red. "This is completely misrepresented. I have always acted in the best interest of this community." I held up another document. "Oh? Then maybe you'd like to explain why you've been using HOA funds to purchase the community park, so you can bulldoze it and build yourself a private HOA office." A woman in the crowd shrieked. "That park was dedicated to veterans," someone yelled. Karen tried to snatch the papers from my hand, but I pulled them back. She was losing control. I wasn't done. "One more thing," I said, flipping to the final page. "A list of property sales for the last 6 months. Every time a resident fell behind on their HOA fines, they were pressured into selling their home below market value. Guess who bought them? I pointed to the screen. A list of LLCs. All traced back to Karen's associates ***. You weren't just enforcing rules, I said, my voice cold. You were stealing homes. The crowd erupted. Shouting. Yelling. A chair scraped back so hard it nearly tipped over. Karen, you lying snake. You tried to take my mother's house after she had surgery. You booted my car while I was at work and fined me $500 to get it back. Karen's breathing turned shallow, she gripped the microphone like it was the only thing holding her up. These are all lies, this is a personal attack by Chief Anderson because he's been breaking HOA rules himself. I let that sit for a second before smiling. You're right about one thing, Karen. This is personal. You targeted nurses, firefighters, working-class families, ***, people who didn't have time to fight back, ***. I gestured to the side of the room. The doors had just opened. And standing there? 2 uniformed police officers. With a warrant. Karen saw them and tried to bolt. She almost made it to the side door before Officer Taylor stepped in her way. Karen Mitchell, he said, voice calm but firm, you are under investigation for fraud, embezzlement, and misuse of HOA funds, we're going to need you to come with us. The room exploded into applause. Karen shook her head violently, you can't do this. This is my neighborhood, I leaned in, voice low enough so only she could hear. Not anymore. She was still screaming as they led her away. Karen's reign over the neighborhood ended that night, but the fallout lasted for weeks. The new HOA board, now free from her iron grip and backroom deals, immediately moved to refund over $115,000 in wrongful fines. Homeowners who had been forced into selling their homes at criminally low prices were given the legal backing to challenge the fraudulent sales. Mitchell Security Solutions? Gone. Every unlicensed guard was escorted out of the neighborhood, their fake badges confiscated. But the real turning point came when the local news picked up the story. What started as an HOA corruption case spiraled into a statewide scandal. Investigative reporters uncovered more neighborhoods where Karen and Greg Mitchell had pulled the same scam, illegal security, fraudulent fines, and targeted harassment of working-class families. Their scheme had been in play for years, bleeding communities dry under the guise of property value protection. Then came Karen's final downfall. Months after she skipped town in disgrace, I got an email from a retirement community in Florida. The message was short, but the attached photo said everything. It was Karen. Trying to join another HOA board. But this time, she wasn't welcomed. A retired judge, who had seen our story on the news, recognized her and alerted the entire community before she could sink her claws in. Within a week, she was forced to resign before she even started. And just like that, Karen Mitchell became HOA poison. No board in the country would touch her. Back home, things finally felt normal. No more petty fines, no more bogus violations, no more fear of stepping outside to find a boot on your car for lowering the neighborhood's aesthetic. One evening, as I stood in my yard watering my lawn, exactly 3.5 inches tall, Emily Carter walked by with her daughter. "Looks like you finally meet HOA standards, Chief," she joked, smiling. I smirked, tipping my watering can toward the grass. I like to keep it professional. Her daughter, no older than 6, handed me a crayon-drawn picture of our neighborhood, filled with smiling faces instead of Karen's dreaded green violation notices. Across the top, in shaky handwriting, she'd written, "Thank you for making our home happy again." I pinned that picture up in my office. Not because I took down a corrupt HOA president. Not because we exposed a scam. But because it reminded me that sometimes, the biggest fights aren't the ones in the headlines, they're the ones in our own backyards. Have you ever dealt with an HOA Karen? What's the worst fine or rule you faced? Share your story below. I bet we're not the only ones.